If your indoor tomatoes look tired every afternoon and you think they just need more water, then there is a good chance you are making the same mistake that ruins thousands of healthy plants every summer. I have seen people pour more and more water into the pot every single day and still watch the leaves curl, the flowers fall, and the fruit stop growing. They believe the heat is the problem, but most of the time the real problem starts with the way they water. I learned this lesson many years ago after losing some of the strongest tomato plants I had ever grown, and I do not want you to repeat that same mistake. When the weather turns hot, many people become nervous because they see dry soil on top of the pot, and they rush to add another watering. The surface looks thirsty, but the roots underneath may already be sitting in wet soil that cannot breathe. That is when the plant begins to struggle, even though it has more than enough water. I know this because I did exactly the same thing for years, until an older gardener smiled at me and said that tomatoes do not die because people forget them. They often die because people love them too much. At first, I did not believe him, because I thought watering more could never hurt a plant during hot weather. Then I slowed down and started paying attention instead of guessing. I noticed that two tomato plants standing next to each other could need completely different care, even if they looked almost the same. One pot stayed wet much longer than the other. One plant drank quickly while another kept moisture for hours. That simple observation changed everything for me. From that season forward, I stopped watering by habit and started watering by what the plant was really telling me. My harvest became larger, my plants stayed greener, and I spent less money on replacing weak seedlings that should have survived in the first place. The best part is that none of this requires expensive tools or special products. You can use what you already have at home and only change a few simple habits. In the next few minutes, I will show you the first thing I check before I even think about picking up a watering can, because this small habit has saved more tomato plants for me than any fertilizer I have ever bought, and most people skip it every single day without even realizing it. Before I water any indoor tomato plant, I never look at the leaves first, and I never trust the top layer of soil, because that thin, dry surface can fool you almost every time during hot weather. Many people see dry soil with their eyes and immediately pour in another large amount of water. I used to do exactly the same thing until I noticed that the plants I watered the most often were usually the ones that became weak first. Their leaves stayed soft, the stems lost strength, and the tomatoes stopped getting bigger even though the pots never looked dry. That made no sense until an older neighbor showed me a simple habit that cost nothing and took only a few seconds. He told me to forget what my eyes were saying and let my fingers decide instead. Now, every morning, I gently push one finger a couple of inches into the soil. If it still feels cool and slightly damp, I leave the watering can exactly where it is. I do not argue with the plant, and I do not try to help it when it is already doing well. This tiny pause has saved me from making the biggest summer mistake more times than I can count. Most people make the mistake right here because they think heat always means more water. Heat does make tomatoes drink faster, but that does not mean every pot dries at the same speed. A larger pot can hold moisture much longer than a smaller one. A clay pot dries differently from a plastic pot. A plant standing near a sunny window behaves differently from one that gets only morning light. Once I accepted that every plant follows its own rhythm, everything became much easier. I stopped following a fixed schedule and started following the condition of the soil. That one change alone gave me healthier roots and stronger plants without spending a single extra dollar. There is another small trick that very few people use. Every few days I lift the pot just a little with both hands, if it is safe to do so. After a while, you begin to recognize the difference between a heavy pot that still holds plenty of moisture and a light pot that is truly ready for water. It sounds almost too simple, but this old method has been passed from one gardener to another for many years because it works. There is still one important detail that makes an even bigger difference during very hot days, and if you miss it, your tomatoes can continue to struggle even when you water at exactly the right moment. Once I know the plant truly needs water, I still do not rush because the next mistake happens during the watering itself. Most people pour water quickly until they see it running out of the bottom of the pot, and they believe the job is finished. I used to do that too, and I could never understand why my tomatoes still look tired only a few hours later. Then, an experienced grower showed me a slow method that almost nobody talks about anymore because it seems too simple to matter. He told me that the roots need time to accept the water instead of watching it race down the sides of the pot. Since that day, I water slowly in 2 or sometimes 3 small rounds instead of one fast pour. I add a little water and wait for about a minute. Then, I add another small amount and let the soil soak it in before giving the final drink. This takes only a few extra minutes, but the difference is easy to see. The soil becomes evenly moist instead of leaving dry pockets hidden inside the pot. The roots stay comfortable much longer, and the plant keeps its strength through the hottest part of the afternoon. Many people make the mistake right here because they are in a hurry and think faster watering saves time. In reality, they often end up watering again later the same day because much of the first watering never reached the places where the roots actually needed it. Another old habit that has helped me for years is using room temperature water whenever possible. I never pour very cold water straight onto warm roots during a hot afternoon because that sudden change can stress the plant. I simply fill my watering container ahead of time and let it sit indoors until it feels comfortable to the touch. It costs nothing, and it becomes part of my normal routine. I have noticed that my plants stay calmer and recover much faster after watering this way. You also do not need to flood the entire pot every single time. The goal is not to drown the roots, but to give them enough moisture to work steadily without standing in water for hours. Once I understood that simple idea, my tomatoes became more reliable every summer. The leaves stayed greener, the flowers held on longer, and I saw fewer cracked fruits even during long periods of hot weather. There is another habit that most people never think about, because it happens after the watering is finished, and yet this quiet little step often decides whether your tomato plant stays healthy through the hottest weeks of summer or begins to lose its strength again. After I finish watering, I do not walk away and forget about the plant, because the next few minutes often tell me more than the watering itself. This is where many people lose healthy tomatoes without even noticing it. They believe the work is finished, but the plant is already giving quiet signs that something needs attention. I always take a slow look at the leaves, the stem, and the surface of the soil before I leave the room. If I see water sitting on top for a long time, I know the soil has become too compact, and I make a note to loosen only the very top layer another day without disturbing the roots. If the water disappears evenly and the soil settles naturally, I know everything is working the way it should. This little habit takes less than a minute, but it has helped me prevent many problems before they became serious. Another old method that someone shared with me years ago is placing a thin layer of natural mulch on top of the soil, even for indoor tomatoes. Many people think mulch belongs only in the garden outside, but it works just as well in a container inside the house. I use a small layer of clean, dry straw-shredded paper without heavy ink, or even a little dry grass that has completely dried first. The layer is thin and simple, but it slows down moisture loss during hot days. That means the roots stay comfortable longer, and I do not need to water as often. It saves both time and water, which is something I always appreciate. Most people make the mistake here because they leave the soil completely uncovered and then wonder why it dries so quickly every afternoon. Another thing I always pay attention to is where the pot stands during the hottest hours. Many people believe tomatoes should stay in the strongest sunlight all day no matter what. I love sunlight too, but during extreme heat, a little protection in the afternoon can make a surprising difference. I do not move the plant into a dark corner. I simply give it a place where the hottest direct rays are softened for a few hours if possible. The plant still gets plenty of light, but it spends less energy fighting heat stress. After I started doing this, I noticed the leaves stayed firmer and the fruit continued growing instead of slowing down. There is one more forgotten habit that almost nobody talks about anymore, and it costs absolutely nothing. But it helps me understand exactly when my tomato is becoming stressed long before the leaves begin to curl. and that small sign has saved many harvests for me over the years. One habit that has stayed with me for many years is something so simple that many people smile the first time they hear it. Every morning, before I do anything else, I spend just a minute quietly looking at my tomato plants. I am not searching for perfect leaves or counting every flower. I am simply learning what a healthy plant looks like on an ordinary day. Once you know that normal picture, you notice small changes much earlier than someone who only looks once every few days. This old habit has helped me solve little problems before they turned into big ones. Most people wait until the leaves begin to droop badly or the flowers start falling. By then, the plant has already been struggling for some time. I would rather notice the first small change and make one easy adjustment than try to rescue a weak plant later. One thing I always watch is how the leaves behave early in the morning. If they look fresh and open when the day begins, then I know the roots had enough moisture overnight. If they already seem tired before the room becomes warm, I know I should check the soil carefully instead of guessing. Many people make the mistake here because they water based only on what they see in the hottest part of the afternoon. During very hot weather, even healthy tomato leaves can droop for a short time as the plant protects itself. That does not always mean it needs more water. I wait until the evening or the following morning before deciding. This simple patience has saved me from overwatering many times. Another forgotten method that an older gardener taught me was to improve air movement around the plant instead of reaching for more water every time the weather became hot. I never crowd several large pots tightly together because trapped warm air keeps the leaves hotter for longer. I leave a little space between them so fresh air can move gently around each plant. If I have a small fan nearby, I use the lowest setting for a short time during the hottest days, but never blow strong air directly onto the plant. This gentle movement helps the leaves dry naturally after watering and keeps the plant stronger without costing much at all. I have also learned not to leave old yellow leaves sitting in the pot because they hold moisture and reduce airflow near the base. I remove them carefully when they appear, and the plant stays cleaner and healthier. There is still one simple step that ties all of these habits together, and it is probably the easiest one of all yet. It often makes the biggest difference when summer heat refuses to go away for days at a time. Dot. The habit that brought everything together for me was learning that tomatoes do not need me to do more every day. They need me to do the right thing at the right time, and then leave them alone to grow. That sounds simple, but it took me many seasons to understand it. I used to check my plants every few hours, and every small change made me want to water again, or move the pot, or add something to the soil. Instead of helping, I was creating new stress that the plant never asked for. Once I stopped changing everything every day, my tomatoes became much stronger. I began following the same quiet routine each morning. I checked the soil with my finger. I looked at the leaves. I noticed the weight of the pot. Then I made one decision and stayed with it unless the plant showed me a real reason to do something different. Most people make the mistake here because they keep reacting to the weather instead of reacting to the condition of the plant. A very hot day does not always mean the tomato needs extra water. A cooler day does not always mean it needs less. The plant itself gives the answer if you are willing to slow down and pay attention. Another old habit that has served me well is keeping a small notebook near my plants. I do not write long notes. I simply write the date when I water and maybe one short sentence about how the plant looked. After only a couple of weeks, I begin to see a pattern. I know which pot dries faster. I know which tomato drinks more during hot weather. I stop guessing because I have my own simple record. It costs almost nothing and takes less than a minute, but it has saved me from repeating the same mistakes year after year. Many people never try this because they think they will remember everything. I thought the same until I realized memory is not always as reliable as a few written words. One more thing I have learned is not to compare my tomatoes with someone else's plants. Every home is different. Every window receives different sunlight. Every room holds heat differently. What works perfectly in one house may not be the best choice in another. That is why I always encourage people to trust what their own plants are showing them. In the final part, I want to share the simple routine I still follow every summer because it keeps my indoor tomatoes productive through the hottest weeks and gives me fresh fruit long after many people believe the season is already slipping away. When I look back at all the summers I have spent growing tomatoes indoors, I realize that the biggest improvements never came from expensive products or complicated methods. They came from slowing down and paying closer attention to what the plant was quietly telling me every single day. That is why I still follow the same simple routine that has worked for many years. Each morning, I check the soil with my finger before I even think about watering. I look at the leaves while the day is still cool, because that is when they tell the truth about how the plant is feeling. If the soil is still slightly damp, I leave the watering can alone. If the pot feels light and the soil is dry below the surface, I water slowly and give the roots time to absorb what they need. After watering, I take one more look to make sure everything feels balanced before I move on with my day. This routine costs nothing and takes only a few extra minutes, but it has saved me from replacing weak plants and wasting water during the hottest part of summer. I also remind myself that every tomato grows at its own pace. One plant may need attention today, while another may not need anything until tomorrow. I no longer expect every pot to behave the same way because that expectation only leads to mistakes. Instead, I let each plant show me what it needs. That simple change has given me stronger stems, healthier leaves, and tomatoes that continue ripening even when the weather outside becomes very hot. If you remember only one thing from everything we talked about today, let it be this. Never water because the calendar tells you to. Never water because the afternoon looks hot. Water because the plant has shown you that it truly needs it. That one habit has made a bigger difference in my harvest than any bottle or powder I have ever purchased. I hope these old methods help you enjoy healthier indoor tomatoes with less work and fewer worries, because gardening should bring peace instead of frustration. Every season teaches us something new, and I still learn small lessons every year. In the next video, I want to share another forgotten habit that helps tomato plants stay productive longer without spending extra money, because sometimes the oldest ideas are still the ones that quietly give the best results.